Hello and welcome to the Channel 51 News for Tuesday, July 29th, and there is a lot to get through. So let's give you the headlines before we get started. There is a net zero war of attrition in Australia. The mainstream media is going after the conspiracy theorists once again. A New York gunman has turned the gun on himself after killing two others. The MSM is praising Donald Trump on the EU trade deal. Thailand and Cambodia reach a ceasefire. There is more bad behaviour being held to account, thankfully, and PayPal to accept crypto payments. And CNN's ratings, well, they fall further. So as we get into today's show, let's get into the news from Australia to kick us off. And Michael Arbon, who you know from this show, who works for Senator Ralph Babet, has announced that just 7 out of 76 senators had the guts to back Pauline Hanson's call to scrap net zero and put cheap, reliable energy first. The rest chose climate ideology over Aussie families, farmers and businesses, high bills, lost jobs and energy chaos. That's the price of cowardice, says Michael. He also supplied the vote tallies, as you can see right there. Those that voted to support Pauline Hanson were Alex Antich, Ralph Babet, Matt Canavan, Pauline Hanson, Malcolm Roberts, and the two new One Nation senators, Warwick Stacey and Whitten, there as well, and then listing all of the others who voted against. So Matt Canavan has come out and supplied his thoughts on the matter and says that the coalition is irrelevant right now, and therefore Susan Ley can take her time on developing a net zero policy. He is, of course, one of the loudest climate action critics in the coalition. He says he's currently undertaking a review of the emissions reduction policy for the Nationals, but has pushed hard from the start to ditch the 2050 target. Asked whether Susan Ley needed to come out and state her position on net zero, she said she'll allow a committee led by Shadow Energy Minister Don Tehan to review the policy. He said there's no particular rush for her to do so. We're irrelevant right now, he said. Who cares what it looks like right now? We've got to get the results. That's what's important. It doesn't have to be neat or tidy or pretty, but it does have to be effective. Canavan and fellow Conservative Liberal Senator Antich voted in favour of Hanson's motion on repealing net zero in the Senate last night. He said that when Barnaby Joyce told him about his private member's bill to repeal net zero, he thought, geez, why didn't I think about that? And I think Pauline had the same view. So this is part of the process of playing politics. You saw by the numbers they're outvoted some 39-7 and therefore are irrelevant. But it's a process and it's a stepping stone. And then you compare what we saw yesterday in the United States with President Trump signing the biggest deal, the trade deal ever, in front of Ursula von der Leyen and saying that the windmills don't work, etc. And it's energy must make money, not lose money. And so it is. It's a process of planting seeds. So yes, it's slow. It's not immediate. We'd like to flick a switch, but it's a step in the right direction. And Canavan is saying that the most important thing here, it is irrelevant at the moment because they are going to get smashed, but things will change in the future. Now, meanwhile, over at The Guardian, they are going full force into taking on the conspiracy theorists, which you may consider would be something in the order of credentialism. In other words, as they are losing ratings and readers and viewers, they've got to try and explain why it is that it's slipping. And the way you do that is you discredit those that are leaving the base in order to build curry with the favour of the people that are supporting you. Only it doesn't work. It's a slippery slope. So let's run you through a series of graphics and then we'll point you to how it's playing out in the news today. So starting off, this is a particular story called Conspiracy Theories Have Leached into Public Life. Is it skepticism towards power or a complete worldview? And as you can see there, the two authors are Cam Wilson, who writes for Crikey, and Ariel Bogle, who writes for The Guardian. And from the story, whatever their prevalence or how deeply these beliefs are held, there's something disturbing at work here. We've watched closely as once fringe ideas and the language of conspiracy have become increasingly part of Australian public life, egged on by politicians and influencers in search of an audience and by irresponsible journalism and new ways of communicating online. So They continue, many people are suspicious about how power works, and they are right to be. In the United States, it's been argued that conspiracy theories about the deep state claims that there is a shadow government in control, no matter who is voted in, partly emerged from excessive state secrecy and official deception. Australia's institutions, too, are notoriously secretive and insular. And the story continues. But when this suspicion tips into an unyielding dedication to stories that can rationally be disproven, when grievance is nursed and monetised, when fear becomes an end in itself, common ground rapidly disappears, and any evidence that does not align with these beliefs, no matter how compelling, is rejected. Now, that is a fair statement, because at the Free Speech Summit, when I spoke to Steve Kirsch on stage, and we made a comparison between how he saw artificial intelligence, and he actually made the point that AI, you can argue with it and it will agree when it's proven wrong that you are correct, and it will change. John Eastman, the former Trump lawyer for 2020, who was a professor, a constitutional professor, also said something similar in an interview that I had with him recently, when he said that case law was presented and he didn't know what the case law was in relation to birthright citizenship. And so he looked it up, read about it, and then went back to Grok and said, hey, you're wrong. And Grok looked at it and agreed with him and said the same thing. So going back to what Steve Kirsch said, he said the idea is that when you talk to a human being and you show them an argument that you disagree with, or you prove them wrong, the shutters come down and they ignore you. So that argument works on both sides of the fence. However, here what's happening is the mainstream media, standing behind their credentials, are arguing that they are right, and when they prove a conspiracy theory wrong with evidence that they present, removing or excluding yours, they're justifying that as a reason why the shutters go down. But the problem we have is the quality of the information that is accepted. We all saw that during the pandemic, how there was data that was actually right in front of our faces showing you that if the more you took, the worse you got, and yet it was still rejected by the politicians in real life. So continuing on, they say terms such as QAnon and sovereign citizens have gone from internet jargon to common parlance. They're monetized and made into elaborate cover for racism. Believers harass nurses and election workers, clog up the courts, infiltrate councils, and even get elected to parliament. In some cases, we see them take up weapons. Well, I don't know about you, but I find that particularly offensive, that it calls for racism. This is the problem that we have here. Now the mainstream journalists are taking leaps that are not supported by evidence. They are roundabout statements that get the people that are reading the Guardian to sort of nod along and say, yeah, that's right. And what that is a confirmation bias that's allowing people to continue. But when you go back to the story and you look at the particular people writing it, two young journalists, what do you expect them to say? It is a juvenile story, a juvenile article, but it is also the subject of a book that they're trying to flog for $36.99. So good luck to those guys. But I think that that's very important to show you today. Meanwhile, what's also happening is that Jim Jordan out of the US says that UK regulators are threatening American companies with censorship. He says, he reports from this particular email that comes from the UK government that is saying that they are now keeping a close eye on Rumble, the video service platform Rumble, over the idea that it is sharing unsafe videos on its platform, trying to put pressure on them, a bit like what they're trying to do with YouTube in this particular case. And this is almost the e-safety commissioner going on. However, Jim Jordan quite rightfully says we will be monitoring Rumble's position carefully. Well, that's what the UK is saying. So he's saying you're not going to censor American companies. So that's a big line in the sand there between the US standing for free speech, and of course the rest of these Five Eyes nations, Australia with our safety commissioner, and now the UK trying to do the same thing. So apparently it's dangerous if you share an information or an alternate view on social media in the UK, but talk about other things like actual violence being perpetrated by certain people against other innocent people, and you actually get taken out for that. So it is very important here that Jim Jordan is making that comparison. Now, we'll go a step further now, and we're going to now show you the brainwashing, if you will, or the mentality of perhaps Trump derangement syndrome, or perhaps it's the idea that it's simply left versus right still in the old school. Simpsons creator Matt Groening, well, he's having a bit of a groan. Let's play it and we'll come back.
Final prediction. The Simpsons predicts kids across America will liberate the Republican parents from the cult of MAGA, and here's how you do it. Grab the TV remote, go to menu, go to controls, parental controls, then edit channel list, then delete Fox News. And mental happiness will result.
So Simpsons creator, who is very good at predicting certain events, is coming out and telling you that the way to happiness is to delete Fox News from your remote control and not watch it, and therefore watch the other stations, presumably, because they're going to, what, tell you the truth or tell you what Matt Groening wants you to hear. And this is this crazy divide that's going on, where if you can literally take news services from different ideas or different factions, and that's going to provide you your truth or our truth. And if you are dealing in the word yours or ours, it ain't the truth. It is a bias. That's kind of obvious. So let's get into the heavy news of the day so far. And what we're going to do now is talk about this, what's happened in New York, where we've learnt that Shane Tamura is the name of the shooter, where New York police responded on Monday evening to reports of an armed suspect on Park Avenue in Manhattan. The gunman later died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Meanwhile, two senior New York City officials told NBC News that at least one police officer and another person were shot. The police officer speaking to CNN said one person was in critical condition and the officer who was shot in the back is expected to survive. Video showed a man with a long rifle walking into a building on Park Avenue, and Jessica Tisch, the New York City Police Commissioner, confirmed that the lone shooter had been neutralized. So what I'm going to do for you is play you a clip from CNN. Now, they are going to tell you something that is completely made up. And interestingly, the person that they're relying on as their expert is none other than former Deputy Director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, who is in the frame for Russiagate. You cannot make this up.
At any given time.
All right. So, Brian, stay with us. The former deputy director of the FBI, Andy McCabe, is with us as well. And Andy, I just want to ask you, you talk about a 44-story building, as Brian is reporting. And what John Miller just said, there were a few things that really stood out there. Among them that they do know what he looks like. Sunglasses, mustache, male, possibly white, and that they were already able to identify various parts of the building where they think he is right now from 911 calls and also possibly video on those elevators, that they were able to move that quickly. And John said they're focused on various floors in the upper parts of the building. Now we don't know his status right now, if that's going to end up being where he is, but they have moved incredibly quickly.
They really have. And, let's be honest, this is the largest, best trained, best.
Andy McCabe, extraordinary. Meanwhile, the suspected white shooter is this fellow, Shane Tamura, who had a concealed firearms permit, and there he was photographed in the street. Headlines confirming that he is in fact dead, and we've even been supplied with this photograph here, clearly blurred out there on this Park Avenue address. Meanwhile, the candidate for New York Mayor Zoran Mamdani, who has advocated for defunding the NYPD, has tweeted, "I'm heartbroken to learn of the horrific shooting in Midtown, and I am holding the victims, their families, and the New York Police NYPD officer in critical condition in my thoughts. Grateful for all the first responders on the ground." This is typical of what we see of the left, that they will hold two positions on every issue so that they will look right all the time, and so that their supporters who go along with them will always say, "See, this is what he said here." But you can't say defund the police and then hold them in your thoughts. So what are you going to do? Not have them when you get into office and then say, oh, well, no one got shot, no policeman got shot because we didn't have any. It doesn't make much sense at all. Meanwhile, we'll continue now. And the other big story, of course, is the US trade deals. Oh, sorry, I'm going to jump in because I've got to give you some other breaking news as well. Andy McCabe, as I just said to you, who was in the frame for Russiagate, well, another one of this cast of characters from the FBI, Peter Strzok. Well, we've just learnt today that he's deleted all of his tweets. Very good timing, wasn't it? So there you go. The cast of characters in Russiagate are certainly nervous, but Andy McCabe, he's still going to work supporting there over at CNN with very few people watching. So let's get back into the trade deal and give you some details now. So Matt Groening said to turn off Fox News, delete it from your remotes. So why don't we now go and listen to CNN about what they think the trade deal means.
Isabel, the bottom line is this is the biggest trade deal in President Trump's effort to effectively reshape the global trading order. That has been one of his central priorities since taking office in January. He's been issuing many threats of tariffs, but they clearly have been working in terms of bringing other countries, allies, and adversaries alike, in some cases, to the negotiating table. And the latest example was today here in Scotland when the leader of the European Commission, who of course is negotiating for the European Union, she agreed to a 15% across-the-board tariff. Now that is significantly higher than the 10% tariffs in existence now, but it's much lower than the 30% threat that was coming on Friday and the 50% threat that was made in May. So clearly there has been an instance where the president has been using his threats of higher tariffs as a negotiating tactic, and in this case it certainly worked.
Did you hear that? CNN telling you that it is a success and that they are now recognizing that Trump actually has some negotiating tactics. Well, let's cross now to hear from CBS.
A major victory for President Trump that averts a painful trade war between the United States and the European Union. The two trading partners exchange $2 trillion in goods every year. CBS's Weijia Jiang is in Edinburgh, Scotland, traveling with the president. Weijia.
Good evening, Jerika. Heading into trade talks, President Trump set expectations for getting a deal done with the European Union, putting the chances at 50-50. And then after a meeting that lasted just over 1 hour, Trump announced they had reached an agreement.
We have good news. We've reached a deal.
President Trump announced the news from his luxury golf resort in Turnberry, where he hosted the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
I think this deal will bring us very close together, actually. It's a partnership in a sense.
It's a huge deal. It will bring stability. It will bring predictability. That's very important for our businesses on both sides of the Atlantic.
The two leaders said the tariff rate for imports from the EU's 27 member countries would be 15%, down from 30% that was set to kick in on Friday. The EU has agreed to purchase U.S. military equipment, $750 billion of U.S. energy, and invest an additional $600 billion in other sectors. And there's good news for U.S. companies that sell to EU nations.
They're agreeing to open up their countries to trade at zero tariff. So that's a very big factor.
So that's CBS. What about if we hear about how the effects of these tariffs are playing out if you are one of the darlings of the left, Bill Maher?
I remember along with probably most people, was saying at the beginning, oh, by the 4th of July, somebody had to think how the country was, the economy was going to be tanked by then. And I was kind of like, well, that seems right to me, but that didn't happen. Now, it could happen tomorrow. I'm just saying that's reality. So let's work first from the reality of that, not from I just hate Donald Trump. Because that's boring and doesn't get us anywhere and leads you to dishonesty. Because the truth is, I don't know what his strategy is. But look, the stock market is at record highs. I know not everybody lives by the stock market, but I also drive around. I don't see a country in a depression at all. I see people out there just living their lives. And I would have thought, and I got to own it, that that these tariffs were going to fucking sink this economy by this time, and they didn't. So, you know, how do we deal with that fact? Because that's the fact.
How about that? Meanwhile, Axios, these are the people that came out with that whole twist in the Epstein story. Their heading is, in the Trump-dominated global economy, the US gets plenty but gives nothing in return. I don't understand that. I can't quite work out who they're working for, that they will do absolutely anything to be so anti-Trump that even when they have a win, they will complain that the people that they're supposedly winning from, now it's a trade deal, it's not win and lose, it's called trade for a reason, but they'll find fault nonetheless. Meanwhile, back in Australia, also in terms of trade, we've learnt now that despite a $22 billion promise, Adani has paid zero corporate tax in Australia, and experts think it won't ever pay a cent. So more than 3 years after Adani started extracting coal from its Queensland mine, the Indian conglomerate has paid zero corporate tax from its Australian project. Tax experts say it may never pay a cent. Adani pledged just over a decade ago to plough $22 billion in taxes and royalties into the Australian economy, and industry groups supporting the coal company have also claimed Adani's controversial plans would fund schools, hospitals and other infrastructure for almost a century. The Guardian newspaper analysis also found that the Abbott Point port, operated by an Adani entity under a 99-year lease signed in 2011, rarely pays tax. Over a 10-year period, it paid company tax on port income on just one occasion of less than $4 million. So what it's telling us right now is that the people who are allowing this to happen themselves are at fault and need to be held to account, and more likely need to be replaced, and new trade deals need to be put into place. How is it that Trump can manage to put these deals together, and here in Australia we just seem to fall on our faces when it comes to these important things? And it's not just Australia bad and America good, because we've already learnt that over in Qatar, they have similar deals with their energy. Their people pay low to no income tax, free health, free education. Obviously, price of energy is very cheap and you have a chance to get ahead. So these things can be achieved, and you don't just need to be Donald Trump to be able to do it. But what you can't be is be what we have here in Australia and selling ourselves out. Now, last night I interviewed Trevor Loudon in an interview that was about Anthony Albanese's communist roots and why we are following this globalist plot, and we went into great detail about that. We also talked about Russiagate, as Trevor had also written books on Obama, Kamala Harris, as well as Anthony Albanese's written many books. Now, the question came up about compromat, and I asked him if this actually can happen, or he's seen it in his work in terms of his work exposing communist plots. Here he is from that interview. Take a look. In your work and your writings over the years studying communism, is there evidence of compromat plots that are used against powerful people to keep them in line?
Well, look, absolutely there are. There's multiple, and just by the way, Ghislaine Maxwell's father was a well-known, Robert Maxwell was a well-known 40-year KGB agent, working for the Soviet KGB. He also had connections with other intelligence agencies, but he was primarily a Soviet agent, and he was sent to America in the 90s to basically set up KGB networks there. So I think you have to have a look at that. But look, there's this is done all the time. We'll put it this way. Okay, there was a story of two congressmen out in a western state. Both were having affairs, right? And certain people in their party said to them, "We know about your affairs, and your wives are going to know about it too, unless you stop voting independently, unless you start doing as you are told." And one of them buckled and did what he was told, and the other one went to his wife and fessed up and made things right and stayed independent. So I could give you countless examples of that. There was a famous de Morange, who was Charles de Gaulle's intelligence, I think it was Charles de Gaulle's intelligence head in France. His favorite trick, he would go to these big cocktail parties in France, where the women wearing the black dresses and the men wearing tuxedos, and caviar was everywhere. And everybody knew who he was, the head of French intelligence. He'd look across the room and catch somebody's eye, wouldn't even know who they were, and he'd go, naughty, 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 naughty. Like, he knows. And he said he did that for years, and only one person ever come up to him and said, what do you mean, naughty, naughty? What do you think I've done? Every one of them had a guilty secret, and he didn't even know who they were, but he played that trick for years. So intelligence services have always used this. They get compromise on people, and they'll make sure they toe the line. You had 51 and senior intelligence officers signing a letter which that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation, of which they had zero evidence. They were willing to put their names to something they hadn't even studied and give it credit, give them, use their credibility to alter the election. You're not telling me that some of those people aren't compromised. So this is, the intelligence service use everything from affairs to pedophilia to drug habits. They study the elites of every country like you wouldn't believe. And if you've got a weakness, they will know about it and they will use it.
Meanwhile, Ghislaine Maxwell also back in the news. Her lawyers have issued a statement, a reply brief that was filed in the Supreme Court. They write, "No one is above the law, not even the Southern District of New York. Our government made a deal and it must honour it. The United States cannot promise immunity with one hand in Florida and prosecute with the other in New York. President Trump built his legacy in part on the power of a deal, and surely he would agree that when the United States gives its word, it must stand by it. We are appealing not only to the Supreme Court, but to the President himself to recognise how profoundly unjust it is to scapegoat Ghislaine Maxwell for Epstein's crimes, especially when the government promised she would not be prosecuted." Well. That is an extraordinary statement, and we'll have to watch and see what comes of that, because Ghislaine Maxwell, with her subterranean license and submarine, cannot possibly put it on us to tell us that Epstein is the only criminal here when she was his right-hand woman. Meanwhile, ICE has arrested over 200 illegal alien child sex offenders in Houston area in the past 6 months, according to Fox News. And that would mean that Matt Groening would have to put the shutters down and not accept that information. Meanwhile, Paul Gallagher, who is the brother of Noel and Liam Gallagher, has been charged with rape and other offences. Police say Gallagher also faces charges including sexual assault, intentional strangulation, and a threat to kill. The 59-year-old has been charged with rape, coercive and controlling behaviour, 3 counts of sexual assault, 3 counts of intentional strangulation, 2 counts of making a threat to kill, and assault occasioning actual bodily harm, according to the Metropolitan Police. He will appear before Westminster Magistrates Court on the 27th of August. These offences have been alleged to have taken place between 2022 and 2024. Also in the news, we've learnt that there has been a ceasefire between Thailand and Cambodia, with Donald Trump announcing this on his page there, as you can read, the ceasefire and peace. Congratulations to all. By ending this war, we have saved thousands of lives. I've instructed my trade team to restart negotiations on trade. I now have ended many wars in just 6 months. I'm proud to be the president of peace. And Trump, of course, has also said that he's giving Russia's 10 to 12 days, which seems to be yet another ultimatum, and we'll see how that one plays out as well. Meanwhile, PayPal has announced that it will allow businesses to accept payments in over 100 different cryptocurrencies. So you pay with the cryptocurrency that you use. It will then be converted into currency or stable coin, and PayPal itself has its own cryptocurrency stable coin. So this is one way of creating an exchange within the money-changing business there. And we've learnt that Caroline Levitt has said that these ratings are so embarrassing for CNN, perhaps they should finally realise their talent is talentless. Let's take a look at some of the numbers here, and they are in multiples of 1,000. So if you're looking at Fox News there at 4 p.m, they would rate 1.94 million people, CNN 475,000, and MSNBC 1.1 million. And when you get to the absolute peak there on CNN, on Burnett's show at 7 p.m, the most they get is 611,000 people watching, compared to Laura Ingraham at 2.5 million, who isn't the big one, the big star. The five get 3.5 million at 5 p.m. Jake Tapper, just 552,000 by comparison. And Wallace there on MSNBC, Chris Wallace, 1.269 million. Those ratings are, well, they are terrible, terrible ratings. So that gets us to the end of this bulletin for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please send your likes, your comments, etc., what you'd like to see or not see. And if you can, I'd love you to share it on the social media platform where you see this, because unlike those two, Cam Wilson and what's her name there, Ariel Bogle, telling us that the conspiracy theorists are in this for the cash, no, we're not. We're in this for the truth, and that's the point. And we'll have to show them up in real time by putting out the news of the day in real terms for all of us. Well, thank you for watching. I'll see you all again tomorrow. And if you get a chance, get over to jasonqcitizen.substack.com. You'll hear my first pilot edition of the radio show on WRMI that's been put on the Substack. And you'll also get to see the full interview that I did with Trevor Loudon last night for the 51st State. We'll see you all on the next show. Thank you.